Hi, and welcome to Sisters of China's YouTube channel. I'm Mia Yamada Heidner, and I'm the founder of Sisters of China. This is our video for National Awareness Adoption Month. And just a quick disclaimer, these are just our experiences, so this video does not apply to all adoptees, but you might find that many adoptees can relate to some of the things we share in this video. Hope you enjoy!
Hi, my name is Jada and I'm 17 years old. I was born in Wuzhen, China, and my parents adopted me when I was 13 months old.
Hi, I'm Kaylee. I'm 15 years old and I was adopted from Anhui Province when I was 13 months.
Hi, my name is Zoe Hartnett. I'm 17 years old and currently a senior in high school. I've lived in the Bay Area of California since I was adopted about a year ago from Yangchun City in the Guangdong province of China. I was adopted by a single white mother who had already adopted my older sister 2 years prior.
Hey guys, my name is Haley and I am 25 years old. I live here in LA, and so it's really short, my adoption story. I was 6 months old and I was either found at a police station or left at a police station. Either way, I ended up at a police station.
My name is Rosie and I'm 18 years old. I was born July 30th, 2002 in the Anhui province. 8 days later, I was found abandoned outside the gate of Hefei Children's Welfare Institute, where I'd stay for 15 months before I got adopted by a Canadian couple.
Hi, so a bit more about me. I'm Mia, and I'm currently 17 years old. I live in Seattle, Washington, and have for the past 16 years. I was born in Yichuan City in Jiangxi Province in China, and I was adopted when I was 14 months old.
Hey guys, my name is Lila and I am from Nanjing, Jiangsu, China, and I was adopted 9 years ago. I was adopted when I was 11 years old in 2011, and I'm currently 19 years old.
Hi everyone, my name is Grace Wyatt. I am currently 17 years old. I was adopted at 15 months old from China by two amazing parents who happen to be Caucasian. I was adopted through Holt in March of 2004.
Hi, my name's Taylor Legend. I'm 25 years old. I was adopted from Wuhu, China in Anhui province, although my actual adoption took place in Hefei, I believe. Apparently, I was found in a movie theater about a day or two after I was born, and then I was taken to an orphanage from then on and adopted at 8 months old with 7 other girls.
Hello, my name is Haley and I am 24 years old. I was adopted from a small city called Gaoan in Jiangxi Province. I was adopted by a white single American mother, and she also adopted my younger sister from the same province as well. I was adopted in 1997 and born in 1996 and was adopted around 10 to 11 months.
Hello, world. This is Grace Strong Allen. I'm 21 years old and raised in Boston, in Massachusetts, and now I live in Washington State. I was adopted from Shaanxi Province on March 17, 2002 at age 3 years old.
Hi, my name's Cosette Eisenhower. I was adopted when I was 14 months old from Zhanjiang, China. I am now currently 19 years old.
My name, as I said earlier, is Lily Dimitrov. I am currently 19 years old, and I was adopted from Guangdong province in China in around 2002. I was about a year old when the adoption rolled by.
Hi everyone, so my name is Ming Fox Weldon, and I was actually adopted in Yunnan province in 1994 at age 4.5 years old. I was first adopted to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and there I met my older sister and younger brother. My older sister is actually biologically related to the parents that adopted my brother and I, and then my brother is adopted actually from Peru. And then another part of me that I would like to disclose would be the fact that I was born with a birth condition that is still a mystery, but that's been a big part of my life because it required surgeries both in China and America so that I was able to walk.
The pros of adoption. I had to think a little hard about the pros of adoption because currently during this time of my life, I'm realizing a lot of my struggles stem from my adoption. But I studied psychology in college, and I think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the foundation of it being physiological needs such as water, food, and then above that is safety needs of shelter and security. And then above that is belonging and love needs such as being in relationships with friends and family. And the top two are self-esteem and self-actualization. And so the good part of adoption is it fills the bottom half of the hierarchy of needs. I have food and shelter and security, and I am grateful for those because if not, I probably would not have the education that I have. I am in my master's degree at the moment, and I also have a loving family. I am lucky to have an adoptive family that loves me unconditionally and supports me. And I know that I am loved by my family, and not all adoptees can say that they were adopted into a loving, caring family. And so I'm grateful for that. Some cons about adoption are the middle and top portions of the hierarchy of needs, sense of belonging and identity and self-worth, and especially as transracial adoptees. I wasn't raised by a Chinese couple, but instead I was raised in white culture, and having a white family also made me feel like I had to become like my family and become like my community, which in turn made me reject my Asianness and being Chinese. And so the cons are not understanding my own racial ethnic identity. In high school is when I really started to think about racism and working against that. Being a Chinese adoptee raised in white culture, I found that I don't fit in with any particular group, which is really isolating.
I think a pro of being adopted is the resilience I've built. My identity crisis and my struggles with my sense of self were all difficult to go through, but I was able to grow and to learn a lot about myself through these hardships. Although there's still a lot I've yet to learn and to work through, I think being adopted has allowed me to learn a lot more about topics that others tend to take for granted. A con of being adopted would be the feelings of alienation I felt growing up and that I still feel to this day. Both my family and the neighborhood I grew up in are predominantly white, so I really struggle with that lack of representation. Today I find it difficult to connect to my Chinese heritage because of this lack of Asian influence I had growing up, and this disconnect to my culture is probably one of my biggest insecurities today. In order to work through my insecurities surrounding being adopted and feeling like an imposter, I'm starting to embrace my Chinese heritage a bit more, and I'm trying to get over the shame I feel for being so whitewashed. In enrolling in language learning courses to learn Chinese and joining community groups with other adoptees like Sisters of China, I'm able to make progress on my journey.
The pros of being an adoptee is to have a roof over my head and having amazing people who love and care about me. A con would be feeling in between, as well as not knowing the answers to my questions.
I would say that the pros of being adopted, especially for transracial adoptees, is you have that view of being in a diverse family for sure, and growing up with hopefully with different perspectives and different cultures and different learning styles. The cons of that is that maybe that's not always accepted, and sometimes especially for us transracial adoptees, the Western influence can be a bit overbearing, and sometimes we don't always feel as close to our birth culture as we'd like to be.
A pro about being adopted for me is the fact that I get to hear about other adoptees' stories and their experiences with adoption. I love talking to people, and I love hearing other people's opinions and thoughts, and so I really enjoy hearing what my fellow adoptees go through and their experiences. A con about being adopted for me is the fact that I have to teach myself Chinese culture and then traditions. I'm really interested in Chinese culture and traditions, and I do not have anyone in my family who can pass down these lessons and stories for me.
I would say a pro would be, I'm not saying my life in China would have been awful, because I obviously don't know that, but I like to imagine and think that everything happens for a reason. And I'm really grateful for all the opportunities I've had here in the US.
I would say a pro to being adopted is that you're different and that makes you unique. I think it's incredible to have something that not everyone has. For cons, I would say not completely feeling like I know who I am. And I know a lot of people struggle with that in general, but not knowing where I came from, who my birth parents are. Another con is not knowing whether or not I have biological siblings or other family members. And so a lot of the unknowns can be very hard to cope with.
One con would definitely be not understanding who you are. Being raised by a white mother but still being Chinese makes me feel like an imposter sometimes in both groups, so it's hard to fit in when you don't fully identify with either group. This also reflects on my friend groups. While I do love all of my friends, at times I notice how separate my Asian group of friends are from my white group of friends, and sometimes I just want them to be mixed, sort of like how I am. Another con is related to my last point in that I feel like an imposter in the Chinese community. Like I said earlier, I live in the Bay Area, which is very diverse and has a lot of Chinese, which is also very good in terms of exposure to my own culture, but I can't fully relate to them all the time. And I can't really relay these feelings to anyone, as I hardly know any other adoptees in my area, and my other friends wouldn't be able to fully understand my dilemma. I will say that one pro is that I can view issues from a different perspective and be more empathetic about it and teach people who can't understand as well. Another pro is the adoptee community, as they've been super helpful in making me feel that I belong and that my feelings are not unique to my situation.
I mean, the cons that I can think of is that it's really hard to answer some of the questions that people ask, such as, where are you from? I never know how to answer that. I never know if I should answer, oh, I'm from Dallas, Texas, or oh, I'm from China. Like, I just don't know, and that's kind of like a heartache in there. Another con to adoption is really not knowing any of our health. Might I have cancer? Might I have this problem in life? Might I have this? And it's something that I'll never know the answer to unless I find my biological parents. And
my family and I, so my brother, Christopher, he's also adopted, and my mom and my dad, we went back to China in the summer of 2018 on a heritage trip. And I had so many fun experiences over the 2 weeks, and I learned so much, and it was a whirlwind of emotions, especially when we went back to the orphanage, because it was really hard seeing the kids there and realizing that I was once in their shoes. It was a full circle moment in the sense that I realized just 14 years ago I was one of them. So that was really hard to process, but I'm really glad I did it. It was also on that trip that I learned how much I love Chinese culture and the language, and so I plan on studying abroad in college and then studying the Chinese language in hopes of becoming fluent one day.
I went back to China in the summer for 2 weeks in July in 2010, right after the summer games, so I got to see the Olympic Village. I got to travel with the Red Thread Tour. It's a Chinese adoption tour with other Chinese people.
So I've been back to China twice. The first time was in 2010 when my family traveled to Chongqing to adopt my younger sister. And the second time was in 2018 when my family traveled on a heritage trip. So my sister and I got to visit our birth cities. On the heritage trip, I actually got to meet my foster mother, which was pretty amazing because my adoption papers didn't even mention her. And so she was able to tell me a bit about my time with her. And she even told me a bit about my birth parents, which was a little shocking. She even said that she met my birth mother briefly when I was born at the hospital. I would like to think all of it was true because it definitely would make finding my birth parents much easier. And that's something I've always wanted to do since I was a child.
Experience of traveling back to China, I had traveled back 1, 2, 3 times. One, to get my sister, who's also adopted. She's adopted from Hunan province. And then I also went back to study abroad, and we also all went back as a family for a heritage tour trip. I think all three of those were definitely like really nice for me to have. I think when I was younger and we were adopting my younger sister, I didn't really get the idea of being Asian and like fitting in. But I think that when we went on our heritage tours, it was definitely an eye-opening like experience. I did that around sophomore year of high school, and coming back, I was like, wow, because I had gone to the place where I was found, I had gone to like the place where I was taken care of. So it definitely I guess it definitely opened up, like, I don't know, it opened up my heart to like really understanding my culture. So then after that, I got really invested in Chinese and Chinese culture. I started taking courses at our local college, and then I applied to study abroad in Shanghai, and it ended up working. So I ended up studying abroad my summer after junior year in Shanghai. And I think that is when I really realized just how like important it was for me to retain my culture and what I have of it left. I felt at home because I was with people who looked like me. I was with people who had shared the same general experiences. There were a couple of adoptees on that trip as well, and we really connected over that. I also stayed with the host family, so I got to see the daily life.
I did go back to China to adopt my younger sister, who is 4 years younger than I am. She is from the south of China, whereas I am from more the central northern part. So I was 4 years old when we went back, and it was a really wonderful experience. And even though it happened about almost 21 years ago, it just I remember it being so much fun, just like seeing everyone around me look like me, and going on the Great Wall of China and visiting an orphanage. And I couldn't fully comprehend what was going on. I couldn't understand it on an emotional level, but it was just a really wonderful, fun trip.
I wanted to share a little bit about my transition from being I guess a disabled person to an able-bodied person, and kind of what that means to me. As I've gotten older, I've done more studying up on the condition, as well as how it's affected people from all over the world, and kind of the struggles that people have with post-surgery experiences and or other methods to correct their club foot or club feet. So basically, when I was in the orphanage or the Social Welfare Institute in Kunming in the 1990s, a volunteer who was from the Netherlands decided to take it upon himself to help support those in the orphanage. And I was one of the first, I guess, cohorts to have support in getting surgeries and just being taken care of. And then when I was adopted, I also got surgery to help support or lengthen my Achilles tendon for my right foot. And also growing up, I had a lot of physical therapy along with casting. And just to elaborate on casting, basically I had to wear a cast to help lengthen my Achilles tendon, and I would sleep with it, and it was definitely a big talking piece, especially at sleepovers with friends. In some cases I was embarrassed to bring my cast because ultimately it was loud because it had Velcro, so I always had to make sure that it was put on correctly, and of course anyone who had to sleep next to me would have to be careful that I don't accidentally kick them with my cast. And in the beginning, I actually had to wear the cast during the day, so I had to walk around school with a cast on, even though my leg wasn't broken. I feel both fortunate and also conflicted with, having corrective surgery, because on one hand, I can walk and run and enjoy being active in life, but on the other hand, there was this strong impression or idea that was projected onto me that I should feel grateful for the surgeries, and that's something that I've struggled with along with being adopted.
Growing up in USA was really hard. especially when you're adopted at age 11. I knew what was going on, but in my head I'm still like very confused. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am not going to see my foster family anymore. I'm not going to eat the same food. Well, since when I got adopted, it was very hard because of English. It was very hard. I had lots of tutors, but when I got adopted, I went into 4th grade. It was really hard making friends because I did not know any English. And I still remember when I was sitting in a classroom, people around me were like talking and talking. I had no idea what was going on, no idea what teacher was talking about. Like nothing. I knew nothing. I fought with my parents, my adopted parents, a lot because I get so frustrated that I don't know how to learn. I can't learn. English is too hard for me, and everything was just hard because like in China I didn't go to school. Like I went to school but I never went to class, if that makes sense, because teachers don't really care about you because I was from orphan. So like I really didn't go to class, so I didn't know math. And history, I didn't know any of that. And then when I came here, it's like completely different. There's science and history. Like I was so overwhelmed.
Some of the things that I've struggled with being adopted has been, one of them is abandonment problems and trust issues. I'm very selective with who I talk to about everything. I'm very closed off. I think that's something due to being adopted. I am scared to let myself be open with people because I'm afraid that they're going to abandon me or leave me if I do something wrong, or if I say something wrong, or if I become too much, because it's happened once. Another thing I think that I struggled with a lot of is feeling the pressure to be perfect, because ever since I was younger, I've always had the mindset if I make a mistake or if I show my adopted parents that I'm not worth something, or that they made a mistake, like they can abandon me instantly. And I know it's all subconscious, but it's still a real thing.
I did have trauma that affected me a lot in my life. I was diagnosed with PTSD, mild one. I assume because of the orphanage, not having enough support system and love and caring, and probably being in a bed 24/7 maybe, or not having enough play or enough attention in the condition I was in, sadly. Probably why I had PTSD, going to public areas and going to the movies, and even authority figures scared me. It was hard to get out of my box and comfort, and it was hard to have PTSD because a lot of my friends didn't have the same worries as me and the same struggles as me, so I felt like I was the only one who had PTSD because of the orphanage. How I overcame this was because of little baby steps. It's because of my adopted parents. My parents pushing me, my parents saying that they love me a lot, that they care about me, that they wanted me to go out of my comfort zone.
The struggle at the moment for me would be, I have started to look into birth parent searches, and I would love to meet a relative with whom I share a common history with and that knows my history and potentially why I was given up. But I know that this is extremely rare, and I've accepted that I probably won't find anything, but there's still hope, but it's still hard to go through those thoughts because obviously you hope to find things, but deep down you know that you probably won't find anything.
I watched the documentary One Child Nation, which got me really curious about myself and others similar to me, but I didn't know where to start searching, so I didn't. It was only until earlier this year that I was really struggling with my mental health caused by not understanding myself and my identity and feeling isolated and alone, which was only amplified by the quarantine aspect of the pandemic shutdown. When I found the Facebook groups of other adoptees, I got so excited because this proved that I wasn't alone and that I didn't have to be alone. They allowed me to discuss my issues and in turn also help them with theirs with so much love, understanding, and support. I'm hoping once the pandemic's over, that I'll actually be able to meet some of these adoptees in real life and become friends with them.
I was in a Mandarin immersion program for about 10 years. So half of my subjects were in Mandarin and half were in English. And something I definitely struggled with was feeling embarrassed about my Chinese skills. Most of my peers were either American born Chinese or they were first generation Chinese immigrants. So they used Chinese a lot at home, and it seemed like Chinese came very easy to them, whereas I had to work extra hard to be good at Chinese. And it felt kind of weird being a Chinese person, but not feeling competent in the language.
I really struggle with is identity and understanding kind of who I am. I feel like adoption, a lot of these things go together, and just a lot of the different concepts are intertwined with each other, and just in general, figuring out who you are, what your path is, and where you go from there.
Some of the struggles, I guess, would be, my main one would be not connecting with other Asian adoptees, because where I grew up, it was a very small, like, hick area, and there were no other Asians, and if there were, I think there was one actually in my area, and he was adopted, I believe. But even when I went to college and everything, I would have Asian friends, but they weren't adopted. So obviously I love them, and I still love them to this day, but I just couldn't fully connect with them. In the back of my head, I'd always want like an Asian friend who was also adopted, so we could really like struggle together. But
I just want to share my stories out there because I just want other people to know that you're not alone, and I totally get you.
The last thing I want to say for advice for anyone interested in adopting or knows of someone who wants to adopt, I want to debunk the idea that adopting a baby is a clean slate, which is not true at all. We have a lot of trauma from separation from our families, and as an infant, we hold that trauma within our bodies, whether or not we remember that memory or not. And so the best advice for adoption is that it should only be done after exhausting the options of family preservation in kinship adoption, which is having other family members such as aunts, uncles, grandparents taking legal guardianship of the child. If neither of those things can happen, then adopt within your own race and ethnicity of your child. Or in my case of transracial adoption, adoptive parents should move to a city with racial mirroring for your child. Or if you can't move states or move cities, intentionally educate your child with culture, with their child's culture, including language, holidays, even when they may want to push it away, still push it on them, because they will regret it later.
I also wanted to say that I share my story because I want to put positive light to someone else that might be struggling like I did.
One thing that I would say to all adoptees is that you don't need anyone else to make you whole. You need yourself, and you need to love yourself and accept yourself for who you are and embrace being different.
Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to all the adoptees that shared their experiences in this video. If you'd like to see more content like this, please make sure to like and subscribe. And if you'd like to learn more about Sisters of China, please check out our socials linked in the description.